Over the last few months, I've created my first boss fight, a tutorial dungeon, and generally done a lot of small tweaks. After that last devlog, I handed out a playable build to a select few people, and it quickly became apparent that the game feels repetitive as hell. I've spent a lot of time thinking, discussing, and testing the reasons for why this is, so I know how to improve the combat of the game. And there are some major changes that I will need to make. Enemies take too long to kill, or there are too many enemies. Either individual enemies need to go down easier, or enemies need to be more of a challenge on an individual basis. Just throwing more enemies at the player doesn't actually increase the difficulty. It only makes the player more bored. It's way too easy to stun lock enemies. Once you start attacking them, there's no way for the current enemy to strike back, which means that there's only a tiny moment of danger at first, but beyond that, once you land the first hit, the enemy is effectively already dead. A number of solutions help with this. If I decided to increase the amount of enemies and make each one easier to kill, that would make this much less of an issue. But I decided to implement a basic revenge value system. If you keep going on town on a single enemy, at some point it will become invincible and just attack you back. On top of that, making the last strike of a combo deal a larger amount of knockback will help too. That way you can't string together combos endlessly as easily. And with that also comes a small tweak to the downtime between ending your last combo and being able to start up the next one. The weapon feels boring. For this one, I'm tempted to say that it should fix itself as soon as I get into implementing the other weapons. But since the whole point of the game is that you only unlock those weapons once you start beating the other bosses, you'll have to go through at least a tutorial along with one of the dungeons in order to get your second weapon. And at that point, you're likely at least an hour into the game already, possibly a little bit more. And having to spend an hour with a weapon that feels like shit, well, that probably just means that people won't get far enough into the game to unlock the other weapons, which will solve this issue. As I talked about briefly in my last devlog, I decided to implement a very basic proximity combat system. When an enemy is in a certain distance of you in terms of height, so not much lower than you or not much higher than you, you'll just do the same combo that you've gotten used to by now, based on my modular combo system that I've made. But when an enemy is above you, you'll do a different attack, which has an animation that makes it easier to hit enemies floating above you. Which has been an issue anyway. When you're under an enemy, it's nearly impossible for you to hit them, because all of my current attacking animations swing the sword forward. When an enemy is under you, a different attack will happen, where the sword gets swung down onto the enemy. This attack I made significantly stronger than the normal combo attacks, so you have some incentive to jump up to be able to attack back down. Both of these attacks don't interrupt your normal combo. So if you were on a combo hit, let's say 3, and you get one of these proximity attacks, your next normal attack will go on from where you left off, so that should be combo hit number 4. Meaning that you can string these things together for a good prolonged combo. Of course, with the revenge value system that's now in place, you might not want to. A serious lack of different enemies. My first idea was only having one type of enemy per dungeon, and that plan still stands. Each dungeon will have one enemy that's unique to that area, and the levels will benefit its specific kind of attacks. But alongside those unique enemies, it's become very clear to me that I need more unique enemies. I had the ranged golem already made, and I even added a ghost enemy, which uses the same AI as the demon enemy, just with different and faster animations and slightly higher attack damage. But all of that wasn't enough. So, as I develop the game, I'm sure that I'll keep adding more and more enemies over the months and months of work. But for now, here is what I have added. A spider enemy that will shoot projectiles at you, and when you get close to it, it'll throw up a force field that prevents you from attacking it. It'll also do the same thing when you trigger its revenge value. A mage or a shaman or whatever. This one has runes floating around it and it can curse you. which means that it'll place its runes around you, where they will orbit you until, after a random amount of time, they decide to move in towards you. The animation for this has a clear anticipation to it to warn the players that this is about to happen, because the only way to deal with this is a well-timed dash. Largely, this guy isn't too dangerous, but he forces you to divide your attention while in combat, because you have to keep an eye on the runes around you. Or alternatively, he forces you to run away and wait out a curse so you can dodge the runes without also having to deal with the enemies before going back in and probably getting cursed again. So yeah, this is also clearly the kind of enemy that if it shows up in a wave, it'll probably be one of the first that you'll want to take out. A lantern that will heal the enemies around it. When an enemy is below a certain percentage of HP, this lantern will move towards it and slowly heal it up. When it's not healing something, it'll be hard to reach. So the idea is that you'll have to damage some enemies to bait it to come down, and then you can take it out. If you can somehow kill all the other enemies in a wave from a certain spawner, it will just come down and hang out over the spawner, waiting for you to just kill it. That's not really the idea of the design, but I can't have this enemy be unkillable and have people get softlocked. For now, that's the handful of enemies that I've made. But my other plans include more ranged magic enemies, casting all kinds of spells that are somewhat different from the simple projectile attacks that I've been using on my current enemies. An enemy that charges at you, but other than that will try to keep its distance. An enemy that lays down mines, but tries to run from you, avoiding direct combat. An enemy that'll rain down fireballs, which I already have the code for that, because that's a functionality that the boss fight I've made already has. And much, much more. But even if I had 100 different enemies, one last important step to improve the combat would be having less combat. Even if the combat were as flashy and satisfying as Kingdom Hearts, or as well balanced and deep as Dark Souls, if that's all you're ever doing, it will get stale. So while the tutorial won't change to include this idea, at least not for the time being, going forward I will make sure that in every dungeon you have to make your way through some platforming too. Of course, I'm not making a 3D platformer here, and the platforming will be more a means of movement than the actual goal of the game, like it is in many Metroidvania games. But hopefully it will break up the gameplay loop from just being mash X until the credits roll. Along with platforming, I'm also thinking that every dungeon might have to include a puzzle room or two. But that's getting a little bit more into dungeon design and my blueprint plans for what each dungeon should look like on its own. And that's not what this video is about. So you'll have to hit the subscribe button to hear more about that, because that's probably what the next devlog will be about. But for now, I gotta polish up some things for this game and see how I'll actually move forward with development. So for now, thanks for watching, and I'll see you back next time. And a very big thank you to all of my Patreons. You can see them on screen right now. If you want to help out supporting the channel, there's a link down below in the description to the Patreon page.